This is the world's best photographer as he literally goes to the extreme for his photos. In the photo, he put a chair beneath the water so it looks like the girl is walking on water, and the product is pretty insane. In this next photo shoot, you can see him walking around waving a towel over a lightsaber, and although it looks weird right now, it will all make sense later. After about 10 seconds of doing this, he walks over to the camera, and because he set the camera shutter speed for so long, the photos turned out like this. In this photo, they wanted to make it look like a cloud was above this girl, so they poured rain in front of her, and they even used a camera flash to create this sick lightning bolt. This one is probably the craziest photo because they used puzzle pieces to create a photo that literally looks photoshopped, but in reality it's just a product of the cameraman's insane skills. And once the photo is done, it looks like this.
When things get too comfortable and you're still living with your parents and you've still got your first job and you don't want to move out because everything's too comfortable, get out. Put yourself in a strange situation in the middle of Barcelona. Put yourself in the middle of Paris, put yourself in the middle of Belgium and see what's available. It's amazing how much confidence it gives you, and more importantly, it's great to sort of eat and travel at the same time.
If there's one thing I've learned over the last 10 years, stay in front of the competition, because there's two ways in this industry. You move with it or it moves you. And I've seen so many sad stories across the decade where chefs have just got lazy, given up and lost that hunger to be competitive. Because it's the best job in the world. That's not really a job, it's a passion. Because when you're rubbing shoulders, and here we are now, 10 years later, and I've got a restaurant next door to Jamie Oliver's, and we're both literally 2 meters apart. Phenomenal chef, and we keep each other on our toes. So that's exciting for me, and that's been the one key issue across the 10 years of filming Kitchen Nightmares. Never, ever, ever give up.
That takes years to become a great chef. What you need to do is establish confidence in yourself. Cooking is an amazing journey, and don't think you can learn it within 3 or 4 years. It's like studying medicine. It's over a 10 to 15 year period. I'm 42 years of age and I'm still learning new exciting things now that I bring back to the fold. But more importantly, vision, I think. I didn't think French was important at school, and I kick myself now because I went to live in France for 3 years and became bilingual. But I wish I'd studied harder with a second language on my belt. That gives you a different culture, gives you a completely different level of confidence. Learning French cuisine, mannerism, and cooking in a very robust, tenacious way. So yeah, vision and open-mindedness. And we never cut corners. The minute you start cutting corners in food, time out. There's no worse job to have than to cut corners in food. So attention to detail, an amazing, exciting journey.
I always think about food everywhere I go. So when I'm training, I'm never very far away from food. I had that extraordinary moment at the start of Kona 2 years ago where I was paddling at sort of 5:30 in the morning, waiting for that amazing cannon to go off. To get rid of the nerves, I just started thinking about recipes and dishes.
Yes, it's also a fantasy story. And I wrote it after I lost my best friend. It's that inspired me to write it. In my main work, the magic system was planned. It's the better version of that I created for my very first fantasy book. As for the story, I have planned start, middle, end, for every arc, but everything else is created along the way. I always work like this. I need to know where to start, where to go, where to end. The rest comes along. I like to say that I have the skeleton ready from the start and I add the flesh on the go. Question: what other novels gave you inspiration for Supreme Magus? Mostly my own inner world. I also used lots of LN/WN as a basis of how not to write stuff. E.g., Harry Potter has the worst magical academy ever, most novels have people go full idiot past 20 years old, etc.
What could you do to improve yourself? Well, let's step one step backwards. The first question might be, why should you even bother improving yourself? And I think the answer to that is something like, so you don't suffer anymore, so you have to. And maybe so others don't have to either. It's something like that. You know, like there's a real injunction at the bottom of it. It's not some casual self-help doctrine. It's that if you don't organize yourself properly, you'll pay for it, and in a big way, and so will the people around you. Now, and you could say, well, I don't care about that, but that's actually not true. You actually do care about that, because if you're in pain, you will care about it. And so you do care about it, even if it's just that negative way, you know. It's very rare that you can find someone who's in excruciating pain who would ever say, well, it would be no better if I was out of this. Sort of pain is one of those things that brings the idea that it would be better if it didn't exist along with it. Too, it's something like, look around for something that bothers you and see if you can fix it. So now you think, well, let's say you go into you can do this in a room. It's quite fun to do it just when you're sitting in a room, like a room, maybe your bedroom. You can sit there and just sort of meditate on it and think, okay, if I wanted to spend 10 minutes making this room better, what would I have to do? And you have to ask yourself that, right? It's not a command, it's like a genuine question. And things will pop out in the room that you know, there's a stack of papers over there that's kind of bugging you, and you know that maybe a little order there would be a good thing, and you know, there's some rubbish behind your computer monitor that you haven't attended to for like 6 months, and the room would be slightly better if it was a little less dusty and the cables weren't all tangled up the same way. And like, if you allow yourself just to consider the expanse in which you exist at that moment, there'll be all sorts of things that'll pop out in it that you could just fix. I would say, start where you can start. You know, if something announces itself to you, which is a strange way of thinking about it, as in need of repair, that you could repair, then hey, fix it. You fix 100 things like that, your life will be a lot different.
I think chatter is one of the big problems we face as a species. We get stuck in a negative cycle that takes this remarkable tool that we possess, this inner voice, and it turns it into a curse rather than a blessing. Problem-solving device. At the most basic end of the spectrum, our inner voice is part of what we call our verbal working memory system. It's a basic feature of the human mind that helps us keep verbal information active in our heads. Our inner voice also lets us simulate and plan. So before a big presentation, I'll go over in my head what I'm going to say, what are the different talking points that I'm going to run through. I'll hear what questions the audience is going to ask me, and then I'll respond in turn. I'm simulating that exchange, and I'm using my inner voice to help me. Our inner voice helps us control ourselves. Think about the last time you may have wanted to reach for a treat late at night, but then you think to yourself, don't do it, you'll regret it in the morning. That's your inner voice. And then finally, the inner voice helps us storify our lives. Many of us turn our attention inward to come up with some narrative that explains our experiences in ways that give shape to our understanding of who we are, our identity. So sometimes this inner voice can be an incredible source of help. Also make us more irritable. That chatter can have severe negative physical health effects. What makes stress toxic is when it remains chronically elevated over time. This is precisely what chatter does. We experience a stressor in our life, it then ends, but in our minds, our chatter perpetuates it. We keep thinking about that event over and over and over again. And that keeps that stress response active in ways that can predict things like cardiovascular disease, chronic inflammation, and even cancer. I'm the author of the book Chatter, The Voice in Our Head, Why It Matters, and How to Harness It.
Now, I often tell people too, fix the things you repeat every day, because people tend to think of those as trivial, right? You get up, you brush your teeth, you have your breakfast, you have your routines that you go through every day. Well, those probably constitute 50% of your life. And people think, well, they're mundane, I don't need to pay attention to them. It's like, no, that's exactly wrong. The things you do every day, those are the most important things you do. Hands down. All you have to do is do the arithmetic. You figure it out right away. So 100 adjustments to your broader domain of being, and there's a lot less rubbish around and a lot fewer traps for you to step into. Be careful what you aim at, right? What you aim at determines the way the world manifests itself to you. And so if the world is manifesting itself in a very negative way, one thing to ask is, are you aiming at the right thing? Now,